Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to take a look at some form studies, and then I'm going to have a look at geometric, organic form studies, and then geometric form studies. So it's a good balance of both. Talk about radial shading, contours, midtones, and then someone posted something a little bit apart from the lesson, and I'm just going to have a look at this. Talk about bad tans. I don't know who this person is. I'm so sorry for using your photo, but you really should have. Someone should have told you that was a bad tan. Come on, unless this was deliberate and you were just making a joke. But I don't think this girl was making it. I think none of these. I think some of these people don't know what they're doing. Anyways, let's get started. So I'm just gonna get a quick lasso around this business. Oops. Okay, so when we do organic form studies, remember form studies come both as geometric and organic. We test out and perfect our radial shading, which is very important for painting portraits and shading anything that isn't really edges. Fat pockets in the face, really, really important. So, so I'm just going to talk about this piece. I'm actually just going to preserve the lasso real quick so I don't lose it. Select inverse. Okay. No, not deselect, just, all right. So your light source is above, top right, a little bit in front on the z-axis, but mid section z-axis, not too far away, not behind the form study, just a little bit in front of the form study. So what that has led me to think is your midtone is non-existent at this point. What we want to do is have more of the midtone and more of that's it, just more of the midtone, less of the shadow and less of the highlight. Always have more of the midtone. Write that back to me. The reason why is because, can anyone answer why we need the midtone the most? What does the midtone represent? I'm really curious to see if anyone can answer this question. I'm not giving you any clues. The way my brush is moving, it's moving along the surface contours. So imagine grid lines all over. Just like this. Longitude and latitude lines, and they aren't like this, they circle around the form. All right. And that's really, really important to remember. It tells you which direction to move your brush. We move our brush this way and that way. So by grabbing the midtone color right around here, I'm going to just remove a lot of the shadows and a lot of the highlights. Always have more of a midtone, exactly. But why? Why should we always have more of a midtone? 3D form. It's a little bit to do with 3D, a little bit to do with the z-axis. Whenever I say 3D, think z-axis, think about an outward movement out of the canvas. The actual color of the object. Good job, Palace. That's the actual color of the object. Very good job. Smack that nail on the head, baby. You just answered that question like you just have a sticker. Just have 10 stickers. That was really good. All right, that's what I like to hear. Just like a direct answer. That's it. The midtone carries the color of the object. The shadow is a condition, and the highlight is a condition. It isn't the local value. It isn't the actual color. So why we need more of the midtone is because we really get to make a statement about the light source nearby. If it's only highlights and shadows, what we end up doing is having a high contrast, high exposure, silhouette type of deal. We don't want that. Now, not everything we draw is going to be highlights and shadows or silhouettes or extreme lighting. And then I get the highlight color and radially build it. I'm radially building the highlight along that z-axis I was mentioning before. So my brush shrinks as I introduce the lightest point. Okay, so we have more of the highlight now than we did before. And that's what your form studies should be all about. We have a much more three-dimensional looking object. And my eyes are constantly going back to the navigator here, so I can take a look at the greater impact of each brushstroke. And instead of having to constantly zoom out and all that, we have the navigator. I like to give it some more space. Just as a quick zoom out, really, really nice little trick. I've been moving into the Cintiq a lot for sketching, and I've been realizing that I need even more space on the navigator. It's very difficult to move away from Of course we have zoom out, but it's not as comfortable zooming out on a Cintiq, and you have to, well, for me anyway, over here I just press a bunch of buttons and I can go all the way out. But for the Cintiq, I'm more inclined to move my head back, and that's not quite enough. So this is a very, very quick little assessment of the impact. So now we have more midtone than before. Where before, let's take a look at it, we had shadow and highlight. And the midtone was a small little gradient. And now we have more midtone than we have either shadow or highlight. And the reason why this is not really reading properly is because the background is a little dim, isn't it? And that means that the light source isn't strong enough for the background. So that means that we have to either lighten the background to get this much light on this object, or darken the object, or shrink the light source. Something needs to happen where the background gets the color it needs. Select inverse. So I'm just lightening the background. That's not going to work, so darkening the background will probably work a little bit better. To explain why the light isn't able to reach the objects in the background. This kind of makes a little bit more sense to me, or this one here. So you either have to make the value lighter in the background and then darken the inner object. The background is always lighter because it's open, more exposed to the light environment, to the light source. So we have more of the midtone. But if the background is, the light source is so strong, even the background is white, or the light source is so strong and the background is dark, that means we have less midtone all around. Something is taking over where there's going to be either too much shadow or too much brightness. And just around here, it feels just a little bit off for me to not allow that part of the ball to get some light. But whatever situation you choose, whatever light environment, always have more of the midtone present. And if it's a reflective object, the reflectivity, the specularity, is very, very strong. And applied with a small brush. You guys can see my screen, right? That mishap last time. But all around, the most important part of the radial shading lesson and any geometric form study you're going to do, aside from studying light situations and memorizing combinations of light sources, is moving your brushstroke along the contours of the sphere and building your shades radially, shrinking your brush the lower or higher you get. So whatever scenario you choose, the darker value or the lighter value. So what I did was increase the size of the gradient of the midtone. You see that I just increased out, lowered the darkness of the highlights and the shadows, and then rebuilt the values radially, moving out. It's always good to have a midtone more than you have any other value. Then you have to think about, the background is still too dark. This is, of course, after we lightened it. When we have a color, when we choose a color, so let's say you chose your lasso and now you chose your value, what I would do to the background is I would lighten it even more. But once I choose this midtone, try not to use shadows. Try to go straight in for the highlight and let the shadow be the accidental result. Just like that. Something about this is not working. Okay, just building that. So with radial, geometric form, organic form studies, get the polygon, the freehand lasso tool, damn it. The freehand lasso tool, and just draw whatever blobs. Blob studies are just great. Oh, so that's why it wasn't working, because the lasso is gone. Select inverse. Okay. And that's it. And what this prepares you for is cheekbones. It prepares you for cylinders, for any spheres. It prepares you for still lifes that have spheres on them, like a vase or I don't know, I always say vase. Anything, any kind of still life that you're going to have. An orb, that's a hilt of a sword. So the light is coming in on the halfway point. It's kind of difficult to tell where the light is coming from. It's either a halfway point like that or like that. And we're seeing most of the shadow side, or like that. And then for the geometry, you have to make sure for the form study, you have to make sure you connect it to the other side. So we're going to have a cast shadow just coming off this piece. With this little swell, this little pipe area, get some light. The shadows don't get to be that dark. The light environment doesn't allow it. And this part is darker, this lower piece, this little, what is it called when you have a bud? There you go. This little piece is a little less, but the top part of this is getting some light because this upper piece is getting it. So we're casting shadows as well as building radially. And you can't wait for the next time you're lucky enough to experience the study of a radial shape like this, free of creative pressure. And the theme recently has been, all about the form study, the value of the form study, the efficiency of the form study, the study power of form study, and how it'll change your portfolio without you having to draw and design any character or write anything. There are no creative requirements. It's just studying. It's a lab environment. Study for the sake of form. Form for the sake of form. Can throw in, if the object is reflective, we have reflective surfaces reflecting back up. Of course, they're not completely lightening. It's a rim light. We still have a terminator. And then the darkest darks, the very darkest darks, which is why radial studies of organic form studies are so important, is because you learn that the shadows actually sit in the smallest little quarters of the form study. They're part of the object, parts of the object that turn away from the canvas, looking completely away. Starting to look a little bit like a neck or a head or shoulder or something like that. And you start realizing the realistic version of cartoons. So imagine like the realistic Adventure Time characters. Really what you're doing is you're going back to the most basic geometry, the most basic geometric anatomy, but you're still shading them. So let's say you were doing Jake the dog and you were shading his head. His head is still a really, really basic geometry. Sorry about that. Okay, so if you were to do a realistic version of him, you just have to keep everything in place, not change anything, not get like a realistic dog or anything. We're just talking about the exact silhouette. You'll be able to transfer this into realism instantly, because all you have to do is find the radial shapes, and you know how to shade them. You know how to build it radially as if he was a 3D model existing in 3D space. So a 3D version of him. So this transfers everywhere. This is usable everywhere. It isn't just for realism. Realism is when you dress up the geometry with more conditions, like nostrils and the curve of the nostrils and the lashes of the hair and all the rules there about anatomy and functional geometry like the nose. But the more stylized you get, it doesn't mean that you throw any of these physics out of the way. You still keep a lot of them. Casting a shadow. And please don't forget to cast your shadows. It is a little bit tricky capturing exactly what you're doing with the shape. Like I'm having trouble now. But you eventually put the right core shadow where it belongs and everything makes sense. The only reason I'm having trouble is because of the light source. I'm trying to figure out what's happening with the light source exactly. And that's as much as I need, I think. I think that's pretty good for whatever this shape was. You see how this is a straight line? My edit would be to edit what I did. It's just to make it a curve instead, because this is a curve. And it'll sharpen at the start and get fuzzier toward the bottom. And that's how cast shadows behave. So there's no better time to start experimenting with cast shadows than now. You have to start with the cast shadows now. In the form study environment. And then one last little high point for the form, just around the middle, which is the fattest point, and that gets a little bit of highlight. And this lower piece where the cast shadow started needs a little bit more shadow. We stay very careful not to throw off the texture. Remember not to keep it, not to allow it to be shiny in one area. If you choose mattified surface, you stick to the mattified surface throughout the form study. All right, maybe the background could be just a little bit darker, just a touch. That shape is so cute. It's such a cute little shape. I would just darken it just a touch, just so we can see that it's a very small light source. It's a tiny light source. It's not some crazy universal light source. And that's why the background is so dark. See all these wonderful things you get out of form studies. You start thinking about things you wouldn't have thought about until your next masterpiece. So what color is the sky? You don't think about that in the study, do you? But in a form study environment, you're asking all those questions already, meaning that you're getting the opportunity to make the mistake. And it's just a form study. Make as many mistakes as you want. That's what it's there for. Okay. Other pieces, we see the same issue. Just you're using too much shadow or too much light. There is no midtone. What I want to start seeing is more midtone. This is a pretty light object. So let's say we had a very very dark object. Okay, so this is the background color. It's pretty much a mid-tone, so I would just lay it right over there. And then get the polygonal lasso tool and just make a random shape. Okay. Just make it a random blob. And I assign these to all my students. I choose a mid-tone. And what this is good for is, again, helping them make the mistakes before it's too late. And we choose a highlighter tone. Usually I choose the background color. It really doesn't matter. It's grayscale. So as long as you don't go too high. And we're thinking about the direction of the light source. For mine, it'll be just in front on a 3/4 view portrait. And don't go crazy with the kinds of light sources you work with. Try to paint with light source directions you're going to use eventually one day. So I cast the shadow, and I built radially, and already we have a read. And the big thing with form studies is that you remember that there is a line at which there are neighborhoods. And this neighborhood right here, just like we covered last time, this is where the shadow sits. So around this line and this line, remember that beard shadow on the face? That's what I'm doing here. I'm limiting that disc. So right under the disc, right under that, is where we have the shadow stop. So around here, just the halfway point, and we have shadow stop. Instantly we have a shape, a three-dimensional shape. This looks like a saucer to you now, but eventually, I promise you, it'll apply. It'll apply to everything you do. And I'm working with mid-tones. There are no highlights and there are no shadows, which means my edges are under pressure. And edges that are under pressure prove to work as a catalyst for your rendering skills. They make your rendering skills a lot more efficient. They work faster. Okay, so sometimes we have a little bit of secondary diffuse just around here, just around the edge. See that? Just a tiny little one. Nothing too crazy. We're not trying to disrupt the values. And our edges are under pressure because we can't go darker, so I have to go in there and define exactly where that secondary light source started. For this weird little shape spaceship. Zoom back out. Have a nice old edge there. Decrease the intensity. And usually we use soft brush. So if you don't have a soft brush, it's just a basic Photoshop brush with pen pressure turned on. And then I'm just going to boost the highlight on the edge just a touch more, and then clean up that edge. So any questions? Edges under pressure. I mean, your edge work is under pressure. Your edge work has to perform. Yeah, it looks like a mushroom. Your edges have to be able to pull off the render without you depending on the contrast to do that for you, right? You don't want to jump into the darks and the lights too soon. Do ya, Nick? No. So you have to let your edge work do a lot of the work that defines the major, like signatures of the edge or the outsides or the silhouette, anything indicated on the silhouette that defines an angle or an edge. How sharp you shrink your brush is what's going to pull that off. So a little cast shadow. Some light at the top, actually. This is wrong. The light wouldn't come in on this angle. So that's wrong. It would come in at the top. That's why it casts the shadow down this way. Okay, isn't that so much fun? And you just sit there and you just do these until you go back to your like masterpiece, you go back to your portraits, you go back to your figure studies, you go back to your whatever it is you're drawing or trying to render, whatever you're trying to get better at, and you realize, holy God, how did I learn to render this? I don't know how to render this. I haven't done ear studies. You didn't need to. All you have to do was study the signature of that form, which is that radial cylindrical wiry thing that you did do in a form study some time ago. And your brain still remembers that. Your brain treats it as a geometry. I thought these were supposed to be shiny surface form studies, so wouldn't you want to have some high contrast? I'm so sorry if that's a bothersome question. Libby, stop saying sorry. No, they don't have to be shiny. You have to. Faces aren't shiny, and these are supposed to transfer off into faces. I'm not sure who told you they had to be shiny, but yeah, they can be mattified as well. You can test out some shine. Let's open Portrait Studio real quick and take a look at what happens when something gets shiny. We'll think about form studies there as well. Okay, so they don't have to be shiny. They can be just normal. And when something is shiny or reflective, then you really have to memorize like reflection beams and those little reflections back. The reflection on a very twisted mirror or warped mirror, the reflection looks different, so you have to start reflecting actual images off the surface. But I wonder if anti-aliasing is on. Is anti-aliasing on, Nova? Show off bounce light. I don't think, yeah, well, anyway. What I'm going to do is raise reflectivity. Just like that. So we do get a higher degree of shine, but it's a very specific area. It's a mirror-like reflection. We still have a lot of midtone, don't we? A lot of midtone. Okay, and if we get a secondary light source in here somewhere, okay, lower that, have it go even lower, and even more in. And we have this diffusion, and if we, again, another reflection point. Do you see that? Because it's reflective. So this isn't highlight, as in, you know, this is the lighter part of the object. But this is there because the object is reflective. A specularity. Whether or not it's water, whether or not it's oily, whether or not it's glass. Let me give this a color so you can see again where that object starts to reflect the light behind it. So it becomes a separate light source in and of itself. And that's not what we're doing with these form studies, because skin doesn't really do this. It does this like around here. This is the best kind of form for skin. And this is completely mattified. And this is kind of what you want to do for skin. Skin is pretty matte. And we're just trying to diffuse shadows over here. Oops. Okay. And then just lower that blue. Don't know why we have a bump there. Let's look at the back. Okay. Nope. And then raise the specularity. Still the same. And the shine. And if we decrease the value completely, then we get this. If we transfer that back to the male model, or the female model, the light has to be from in front. Value has to be just a little bit lighter. Just like that. Get that Silver Surfer thing. And this is reflectivity. We treat this as a reflective object, as a watery object. And this is that mattified business. I'm gonna turn that off. There we go. And that's with it really, really bright. And we're just raising reflectivity like this. And this is where it should be on a healthy level for skin, because it's got oily bits, but it's not oily everywhere. So you see there isn't any real mirror-like reflection of the presence of the light source as an image, but only the areas that we tend to treat as watery, and raise specularity in these areas only. And the darker the skin gets, they stay in the exact same spot, just a little bit brighter, because we really show off the watery aspect, the specularity, the darker the value gets. And all this transfers back from form studies, from geometric form studies. Okay. So that's a tiny little lesson there for form studies. I wanted to include at least one of my classes to cover this, because there is a glossary being built up right now by some of the students, like a reference glossary available in the community of all the terms that I use in my classes. So if you don't know what value sharing is, there's a glossary there to define it. And so I want to make sure that I cover at least one principle or fundamental segment in the session that will feed that glossary, and will work as a reference for it. So for this piece, what I want to do is just raise this value up just a little bit. Okay, I want to talk about skin, and that's why I looked up that bad tan thing, because that's pretty much what's happened here. Alright, this is the bad tan. Scary, scary tan. I don't know why people do this to themselves. They're going to turn into leather in a couple years. They're not going to look healthy. But yeah, that's a bad tan, and that's pretty much the skin type you're choosing from right now. That's all it reads as. Unless he was particularly orange that day and he was sitting beside a fire and it was really, really dark. But at this point, we need to decrease saturation. Oops, gotta deselect that. Decrease saturation and shift this over into the pinks, but even then, skin isn't that saturated. As soon as I desaturated it, the skin started to feel a little bit more realistic, because that saturation level was out of this world. And what I'm going to do again is desaturate all the areas the light is touching, because light is white yellow, not yellow yellow. It's not a hot yellow. It's a whitish yellow. So I'm going to keep some yellow behind, but for the most part I'm going to desaturate. I'm also going to desaturate his beard area, almost down to gray. And his eyeball area is going to get desaturated down to gray. So you wanted to learn in your little submission, you said, I want to learn how to paint realistically. Realistically isn't this crazy superpower level 9 over 9,000 saturation. It's like this crazy, everything is on high. It's not, that's not what realism means. Realism is subtlety. Pulling off a lot of form with subtlety. I'm going to get a yellow white again and apply it to all the areas here that are getting some light. So you see we pulled it. You already had done such a good job with the blending and the expression and the angle. Kind of feels like he's a knight wearing those that armor chainmail. And all you really need to do is just, you needed to have a little bit more subtlety. Everything else he did right. So that saturation was not realistic. That was a very unrealistic saturation. And then another thing that you need to do is I grabbed the value of the darker areas and lowered this down to red, and so I can get that purple. And that purple, I'm just going to lay it everywhere where we have shadows. And it's just a matter of desaturating and cooling. All shadows get desaturated and cooled. It doesn't mean you bring purple, it means you find the realistic, the cool version, the cool equivalent of that value. Okay, so now all you have to do is just focus on form, rendering the nose. That little bit of light, you had excessive light here, that should have been a cast shadow. You were trying to do some secondary light sources. Go for it. Don't be chicken. Just go for it. Go for it. If there's a secondary light source, don't just inch around the edges. Go for it. Go for the full representation of that light source. So, you know, if it's like a color, if there's a color with it, make it that color. Make it like a bluish color. Believe in yourself. So just around the sides, over here, we had some of that secondary light source. Along the chin. Chin is spherical, dome-like, so it's going to get a lot. Oopsie. And what I do with secondary light sources, I just apply a lot and then erase away. It can be more intense than the light source, the primary light source. It has to be contesting, but not, not contesting, but similar to. Definitely not contesting. Bad choice of words. And then just some edge work. Clean up your edges. Okay, so realism is about subtlety. Write that back to me. It's a very, when you realize this in your work and you're studying and you realize, hey, realism is about subtlety, isn't it? It's going to be a pivotal change for your portfolio. You're going to notice changes happen to your body. You're going to notice changes happen to your portfolio that you would never have figured out if you hadn't, realized it's all about painting less, not more. Providing less paint. Doing less work. Using less of an array of shadows and highlights and using more midtones. More subtlety is realism. Okay? I don't think there will be any changes happening to your body, don't worry. Realism is about subtlety. Good. Good. Okay, so I just duplicated this layer again. So let's take a look at the before and after. I grayscaled the background and lightened it. When you're doing studies, whoever did this, when you're doing studies, just leave the background out of it. Leave the background alone. Okay? So before, I'm not sure what you were going for. Like I said, it only works if it was in a dungeon and he was wearing his little chainmail and he was sitting around a fire with his buddies. But if you weren't going for that, if you were going for some kind of daytime scene, you're not pulling that off right now. Daytime scene, your background has to be light enough. And even here it looks like a very, there's no sharp cast shadows. Daytime has sharp cast shadows. So it looks like it's an overcast day. But if this is what your current visual library has for skin tones, the equivalent of that is that. And that should not be anywhere near your portfolio. Doctors hate her. If you buy Istebrak's InstaFit form program, you'll see your mind and body transform. Damn it, I was so excited for the bodily changes. Fine. Your body changes when you do form studies. You'll start growing a mustache and your hair will turn purple. Oh, okay. So that's all I have for today. I have another form study I'm going to look at with just to instruct a little bit about cast shadows, but that's it for skin tones. I had to lower that saturation slider all the way down. Okay, so if you want this sent back to you, just message me on Facebook. So for cast shadows, all you have to do is remember that a cast shadow is the remainder of the light rays no longer on the surface of the object. So this is the light ray traveling on top of this surface, but over here it ran out of surface. So it went to the next nearest surface. When it did that, it traveled in a straight line, and a cast shadow is a reflection of that. So it traveled in this like angle, I guess. So we have a cast shadow just there, and this cast shadow exists everywhere. It's in every part. So it's an air of no light. The air itself has no light as well. The air inside this space has no light. So it's not just about bringing the shadow down here and just stopping it here. It's about carrying it all the way up. This entire area hasn't been fed by light. A cast shadow is darker the closer it gets to its root, and sharper, and fuzzier and lighter the further it gets from the object casting it. It takes the shape of the object receiving it, as well as the reflectivity, the diffuse, the shine, the texture, all of the object receiving it are all inherited by the cast shadow. So if it's reflective, the cast shadow becomes lighter. As for how you did this, though, it feels like the light is coming from above, but at the same time, this part is dark. If the light was coming from above, this part wouldn't be so dark. The reason why I responded to a light source coming from the side is because this half feels like it's the umbra, feels like it's the main dark point. It doesn't feel like this is a mid-tone. If the light was coming from above, which you've indicated here, this would be much lighter. So this is what happens with form studies. You get different variations because you have two different lights shining on the object. And that's why you've got to do form studies. You got to fix that. If you're one of those students that paints portraits or paints anything, and you have accidentally use two light sources instead of one, and you're responding to both in different areas across the face, that is just throwing off your form language completely. The face looks bad. That's the result. In the most basic way, the face ends up looking bad. So what you have to do is, if the light source was coming from the side, this would happen. But that means that this area here would actually be much lighter because it's part of the forward-facing area. See that? So that now it makes sense just by changing that little piece. This can stay dark because it's not part of the light. Seems like it's somewhere around here casting the light. Okay. And this surface would be as dark as this surface. So this would be the value of this, or just a little bit darker. If this is what you want to, if you want to keep this shadow, that's what has to happen. And just around here, it's a little bit lighter because that's where the light source is coming from. Learn how to cast your shadows, boys and girls. So let's take a look at the before, after. Just a bit of a confused lighting situation. This area wouldn't be dark. This wall wouldn't be dark unless someone was a troll and came and got a slightly darker than usual Gray Valley and painted only this wall just to throw off your reference. That's not possible. If it was the same color with same paint used on all the walls, this is what it would look like. And even then, this surface here wouldn't get to be that dark because of the reflective surfaces nearby. It just get to be a little bit like this. And this surface, because it's so light, we diffuse its cast shadow. Just like that. its version of the cast shadow is much lighter. So please get into doing your cast shadows. They're so important for your work. You have to start casting shadows off eyebrows, off noses, off lashes, off eye sockets. If you don't start now, if not now, then when? Okie dokie. Damn graffiti trolls. Any more questions? Any more questions regarding this? Okay. Let me look for my name. No, I don't remember who drew it. It was just posted on the community. You can find the artist there. Cheetos. Trump tan. Thank you for linking the community glossaries. Take a look at the community glossary, you guys. It's really great. I'm so sorry, I forgot the full name of the person who made it for us. I'm not sure if they want me to say their full name. I don't know, probably not. But yeah, have a look at it. It's available in the community. So whatever if you're watching the class or you're taking notes, this is an open, like you can make notes on the document. I'm not really sure how to. I think you can make comments, yeah. I'm not really sure how to work with Google Document, but anyone can edit it if it's been allowed, if the option has been set to edit it. And everything that I cover, even a screenshot from the beauty triangle and the beauty rules, everything is in here. The person who made this put in a lot of work. Thank you so much. I really can't thank you enough for this. I am going to have a look at this, and I'm going to have a copy of it available. I was working on something very similar to this, but not as a glossary, more as an essay or a final piece of literature that I was going to have out there for you guys for my book. But this is the next best thing for now. Okay? I think these are the people currently logged on. Hey, Nick! Alright. So that's it for today. Not much to cover. There wasn't much in the community. But if you want to join the community, just go to istebrak.com and go to the little G+. And you can join here. And it's pinned at the top of the community, the glossary. You just have to go here. Make comments on anything you find, any terms that you feel like you need to memorize, or any terms if you need explanation for. If it's not in the glossary, recommend it. I'll be having, as soon as it's done and I have a final draft, they're going to send it over to me, and I'm going to edit it and make sure everything reads well and everything is accurate. All the definitions are accurate. But it's pretty much referenced by my from the lectures that we have here 2 times a week. All right, what did everybody say? Istebrak, you can add review comments to it. Yes, review comments. I don't think you can edit it directly. Istebrak, where do you post form studies? You can post them here on the community. If they tend to be too big, I'll make a little document, a little category on the side for form studies. Your screen name is not a real name? Oh, I was going to read the name on Facebook, but yeah, Tensindrate is your screen name. Should you start with more organic form studies or more edgy form studies in the beginning? Try both, Ukami-san. Try both. Try basic cubes, pyramids, triangles. If you ever looked at the nose, how to paint nose video that I made, I did cover a lot about one of the most important nose core geometries of the nose, which is that pyramid shape. And yeah, you're going to have to go to that shape and learn how to shade it in different perspectives so you can carry that over into the nose. So that's a very, very basic shape, but it's also very, very applicable. Just because it's basic doesn't mean it's simple. And it'll take some time. But at the same time, after you're done the geometries and you have all these these low polys, you're going to have to transfer all of these low polys, or these high poly, low polys into high polys, which means you're going to have to add fat pockets. And fat pockets means we're going to be blending and shading and radial shading and gradients, and that stuff also has to be studied as a form study separately from organic form studies. Making blobs and learning how to shade the blobs. All that promises that you can shade arm fat, you can shade a shoulder, you can shade a knee without having to think too hard or use a reference too closely. But yeah, not everything gets critiqued, no. ASMR drawing when? What? Hey Istebrak, before you go, any good books discussing art history that you could recommend? Books that I recommend discussing art and art application, Alla Prima definitely is one that really, really inspired me growing up. As for art history, I would just have to go look through my like Amazon wish list or have some stuff in there. I think no. I'd have to just look through my shelf. I have a couple on modernisms in art and impressionism and that movement. I have a couple about abstract and that's it about I don't really have anything about the romantic eras or anything like that. But what you really have to study, all that you really have to study, and if it's really an interest factor. Master studies and studying the masters and what they did, it's just about core, just there's the only reason why you should go into studying how masters did their thing is how they varied the rules, but the rules have been the same since the beginning of time. You want to paint skin, you keep everything desaturated, and they pretty much do that as well. And so when we study the masters, we study their specific technique and how they pulled off this color and their color choices and their habits, good or bad. So if you want to study art history, study it out of an interest, not studying it out of a way to say this is going to improve my art, because it's not. This is all history. It's not going to improve your art in the way you apply it. So if you want to spend time reading a book that does change the way you think about painting, Alla Prima is the way to go. Color and Light by James Gurney, of course, the best. It was recommended to me growing up, and I read it, and I recommend it again. Just the basic, really, they are the basics. There's this other one, I forgot his name. He draws these really, really great things. I need to make a list of all the books that I recommend you guys read and have them available for you guys to buy or download or something like that. Should we paint the highlights first and then the shadows? Neither. You choose the mid-tone, and off the mid-tone you choose a slightly lighter than usual mid-tone, and off that you choose a slightly lighter value than that, and you just keep building up. Highlight is a highlight. A highlight is a really bright point. Shadows are the darkest point. Everything in between those two ends of the spectrum, which should be very, very little use, you have midtones and variations of the midtone. So you should be more specific. Should we paint the highlights first or the shadows? Say, how much time should we spend on midtones before we bring in the accents values, which are highlights and shadows. Yeah, art history is great for inspiration, definitely. Like out of the interest, whatever interest or whatever it serves for your art journey in that respect, or if you just feel like looking at what an artist did with colors. But yeah, technique-wise, knowledge-wise, application, sciences, you need the actual books that teach you the theories of art. Spend time on those if you're a student. Don't worry so much about art theory and art history and movements of art unless you're really, really interested in that stuff. Okay, Annie, I'll make the list as soon as possible. I'll make a list for you guys. I'll probably make it like an Amazon list or something, not a shopping list or a gift list. I don't know. I'll just be able to link you the list on Amazon. I'm sure Amazon has a way to do that where you can make a list for other people to buy for themselves. But yeah, that's it for today. Very short class, very straightforward class. So to join the community, you just have to go to my website and click the Google Plus icon. Please remember to follow the rules and read the rules. Don't come in here recommending or asking like and subscribe my channel. This is not what this is about. If you have work to be critiqued, post it and we'll critique it. Make sure you upload it properly though. Other than that, there's nothing else acceptable. I have opened a music for drawing topic. So if you're at a loss for music, you don't have any music to listen to, a lot of people have recommended a lot of nice playlists, which are really nice. I go through them. And if you want your work sent back to you, if I painted over your work for any reason you want it back, just message me on Facebook. Announcements are always available for you on Twitter if you follow me on Twitter. But that's it. That's it for today. Very, very small stream. Please remember that if your daylight savings time hasn't yet happened, class is going to be an hour later. Fall back, spring forward. So yeah, an hour later, I think, for you guys. I can't tell. If it's an hour later than usual, then it's an hour later than usual for you guys if you haven't changed. For us, it's time as usual because our clocks change. But for you guys, it's an hour later if you haven't moved forward as well. Okay, so a lot of you are going to be late if you don't catch up to this. I think European time zones don't do daylight savings the same time as the West. But can you please create a work in progress page for the Discord? Okay, I'll take a look at that. All right, I'll see you guys next week on Tuesday, 5 or 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you everyone for joining today. Have a great day, guys. Bye.